Alright, so today we are going to be practicing how to represent our fractions. So yesterday we learned about what fractions are. Right, today we're going to go through some ways that we can represent a fraction. Okay, so here in this example, we have our fraction 2/5. So from yesterday, we remember that our denominator, which is the bottom number, or 5, tells us how many parts there are in total, right? In our numerator, the number on top tells us how many parts we're talking about. So if we have the fraction 2/5, we are looking at 2 parts out of 5 in the whole object. Okay, and there are different ways that we can represent a fraction. One way is on fraction bars, which look like this rectangle down here, which is broken up into all the different parts depending on what your denominator is. And then we shade in however many parts we're talking about. Next we have our number line. Okay, we've worked with number lines before, so you should be familiar with this. We break up the number line into however many parts our denominator is, and then we plot our numerator, however many parts we're talking about, onto the number line. Okay, next we have parts of a group or a fraction of a set. Okay, so we have a number of objects or items. So here we have stars. And in our set, our group, we've got 5 stars because our denominator is 5. And so how many of these objects are going to be shaded? Well, that depends on our numerator. And lastly, we also have the circle model. So this is also like a pie graph, if anybody's seen a pie graph before. So the circle is split up into the different parts, kind of like your pie pieces, depending on what your denominator is. And then we're going to shade in however many slices as our numerator tells us to. Okay, so 2/5. All right, first off, let's start with our fraction bars. So we're going to shade how many parts? Well, our numerator is a 2, so we're going to shade 2 parts, right? And let's check if our denominator is correct. We should have 5 parts to make this a whole bar. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 5 parts to make a whole. All right, so we're going to shade in 2 parts. 2. Okay, there you go. So this fraction bar now shows 2/5. So now we've colored in 2/5 of this fraction bar. Okay, we're going to move on to our number line. So here we have our number line. Remember, a fraction is smaller than a whole, right? So here we have 0 all the way to 1. It's less than 1, right? It's not a whole. And because our denominator is 5, we have to split this number line into 5 parts. So we have 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts, 4 parts, and 5 parts. Okay, and our numerator is a 2, so we've got to represent how many parts of this whole? We've got to represent 2 parts of this whole. So we're going to plot our dot on 2/5 on the number line. Okay, just like that. So this number line is now showing 2/5. Oh, and we left out this part down here. How many parts is the whole divided into? Well, the whole was divided into 5 parts, right? All right, let's move on to parts of a group or a fraction of a set. So we've got how many stars here in total? We've got 5 in total, right? So out of 5, how many are we going to shade? Our numerator is a 2, so we're going to shade 2 out of 5 of these stars. Okay, so let's go ahead and shade 2 out of 2 stars out of these 5 stars. Okay, there we go. So 2/5 of these stars are now shaded. All right, and lastly, our circle model. How many parts are we shading? We're going to shade in 2 parts. And our circle has been divided into how many equal parts? Our denominator is 5. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's been divided into 5 equal parts. And let's go ahead and shade in 2 of these parts. Okay, so 1, 2. And 2/5 of the circle has now been shaded. So these are some ways that we can represent our fractions. So today you're given a few sheets, one that looks exactly like the first page. So all of the circles and sets have been drawn for you, and all you have to do is fill in the numbers and shade in the parts. Okay, and then you're going to be given 2 other sheets that look like this, they're pretty empty because you now have to figure out on your own how you're going to represent the fraction that you've been given using these different ways. Okay, so you've been given a bar. You have to split this bar up into equal parts. How many equal parts are you going to split it into? Okay, same with the number line. How many equal parts are you going to divide this number line into? Parts of a group. How many objects are you going to draw in your group, and how many of those are you going to shade in? We've got our circle here drawn for you. How many parts are you going to split it into, and how many parts are you going to shade? You've now got to figure that out on your own. Okay, and if along the way you get a little confused, don't worry. Remember, you've been given a poster to refer back to in your work pack. Okay, so it looks exactly like the example that we did in this video. Okay, if you have any questions, you can find us on Seesaw.